Welcome to the Construction Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Campbell, and with me, like he is every week, my brother, Eddie Campbell.
What's up, Tyler?
Not much, Eddie. This week in Architect Speaks. Eddie, we came in this morning and we just didn't talk. So I feel like I haven't seen you in a couple days and stuff. I feel like we just need to do a catch up now. But are you tired from your trip yesterday? You were on the road literally all day.
I was, yeah.
How long of a drive was it down there? Because you went to Florida.
It was 7 down, 7 back. So, I mean.
In one day?
Yeah.
Ouch. How's your back? How's everything?
I mean, everything held up pretty good. So, okay. Early morning, late night.
The podcast hasn't been able to afford you like a private jet yet or anything?
That's funny. No, it hasn't actually.
One day. Goals. Dan, how's it going, man? Thanks for joining us this week.
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
If you've got a private jet, we could definitely use it. If you got one of those. Does Lake Flato have a private jet that they just let you use? No?
We do not. We fly coach.
Yeah, that seems about right. We can't all be Frank Gehry. Dan, tell us who you are and what you do, man. Let's dive into this. I'm excited to kind of hear what you've got going on.
Well, I'm Dan Stine, the Director of Design Technology, and I also lead our internal research program at Flato Architects. We're based in San Antonio, Texas, where I live. We also have an office in Austin and handful of people that work from their remote home locations around the country. Let's see what else. I teach graduate architecture students at NDSU. Fall semester starts on Monday, so looking forward to that. I've written 17 textbooks. One of them is the #1 Revit book in North America in the academic market. And I'm also on the AIA National Committee on the Environment. So there's 13 of us that oversee all things COTE in terms of the AIA activities. And I think that's about it.
Okay, so of the books that you've written, how many of the books behind you did you actually write? Because I know you have a ton of them.
Yeah, all the ones on this side are ones that I've written. In fact, there's another bookcase that looks just like it off the screen to your left. So the Autodesk books are updated every year. My first Revit book is copyright 2003. You may or may not know that Revit came out in the year 2000. So every year I update them because Autodesk comes out with a new version. So I have access to the early betas and have them all updated. The publisher edits them and prints them and has them in stock by fall semester. So all the Autodesk products come out kind of end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, and then fall semesters right now, basically. So there's a busy time in there for me, in addition to working a full-time job.
I don't know how you crank all of that out, because when we were out in San Antonio shooting that video together for Lake Flato, I was just not expecting that number of books to be you have that much time to just crank those out or find that much time. And these are not small books, guys. These are not little tiny little things. These are thick textbooks.
Full-on textbooks.
Full-on textbooks. And you had what was it, a cookbook that you made too?
Yeah, you had to bring that up.
I had to bring that up.
Yeah, actually, I'll show it to you. It's not a cookbook. It's a food safety management and culinary arts course book for high school students.
Excuse me. I meant to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're excused. The best part, though, is that so I was paired with a subject matter expert. I don't want to get too far into this, but 30-year trained British chef, works in the Carolinas. But the cool part is my youngest, who I mentioned before the show, is studying graphic design at MCAT in Minneapolis. They did the graphic design for this entire book, which is super cool.
That's awesome, man. That was an unexpected one too. So all of that to say, we've got a lot of big subject matter expert here to speak on architecture and some of these different things, right? So this is a lot of fun. So every architect kind of has their own niche and stuff. Could you kind of define what your focus is? I mean, obviously writing, but among that, what's your focus?
I'll just quickly tell you about the types of work that Lake Flato does. First of all, in 2019, Architect Magazine ranked us the #1 firm in the US, which is really cool. And then I mentioned Committee on the Environment, which is called COTE, COTE. And they have a top 10 award every year for 10 projects that are high performing and beautiful. And we've won more of those than any other firm in the US. So the firm as a whole has 5 studios. One of them is higher education, K through 12, eco-conservation, urban planning, and then residential. So those are our 5 studios. And within the practice, like I mentioned, my focus is Director of Design Technology is the main thing I do. So I oversee all things, working closely with our Director of IT, things related to technology that's used to design buildings. So not network stuff or, specific hardware management and support.
So within that technology, you're a heavy technology role. You're going in, you're kind of exploring new things, new tools, new ways of doing things, and trying to spread the word about them to try to get those more in your everyday use at Lake Flato.
Yeah, I mean that's the crux of it. I have a really fun job. I get to kick the tires on technology and really try and find practical ways of making our projects more accurate, delivering them more efficiently, and just making cooler buildings at the end of the day. One thing in terms of communicating that too, that's really cool. I forgot to mention I have a blog called BIM Chapters, and depending on if I'm writing about anything interesting or not, it gets somewhere like 20 to 30,000 views a month. So that's also a kind of mechanism that I have, both promoting Lake Flato stuff, but just other, like my books and other things that I'm messing around with in general. I publish and share that information, and it's a kind of a cool community, because then there's a lot of people that chime in on what they're doing and what they like and don't like about stuff I'm talking about.
I just don't understand. My brain cannot handle that much writing, and you crank it out, dude. It is insane.
Well, I always say I think the reality is I'm kind of a boring guy. I don't watch sports, and I don't know. It keeps me out of trouble mostly.
I love it. So, all right. So let's dive into some of the cool things that you're seeing. As you're exploring around, you get to kick the tires on a lot of really cool tech and new processes and unique tools. Let's dive into that. What are you seeing right now that's kind of getting you excited? What are some things that you're, looking forward to in the next couple of years? Just, share what you got.
Yeah, there's a little laundry list of things from AI and VR, CA, design, project management. One interesting thing that we implemented about a year ago in terms of project management is a tool called Tonic DM. Have either of you heard of it?
No, that's new.
Have you heard of New Forma?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So New Forma is what we used to use, and we transitioned to Tonic DM. Basically, it's email management and file management, file sharing management, and also a construction administration tool, pretty much heavily geared towards the design side of the AEC market. And so all of our emails, for example, can get filed into the system, and we can actually file them on send. So every project has its own email address that we can copy to. Or if we've received an email, there's this integration in Outlook, and it's a really high level integration. So even if you log into Outlook on your home computer, this Tonic DM thing will show up, and you can file emails into the system. It's all stored in the cloud through AWS. So it's a really high test archival software or platform, I should say. where we can't even delete something, even if we wanted to. Like perhaps somebody thought, oh my gosh, this email is going to get me in trouble. I better make that go away. It's not even possible. Like nobody at like Flato can delete anything out of it. We actually have to go to the company and ask them, because occasionally, a couple of times we've actually misfiled something. Like, oh man, how do we get that out of there? So we have to actually have them do it for us, which is great because it's just a really, like I said, a high test archival communication system, which is, is helpful when it comes to like, risk management and liability. And so once you filed, it's sort of like crowdsourcing too. Once somebody on the team has filed the email, everybody sees this little gold bar show up in Outlook next to the email, indicating that it's been filed. And then all future correspondence of that email, forwards and future replies, get filed into this system, which again is all in the cloud outside of our system. And then this same platform allows us to share large files, and so that sort of tracks who downloaded the file and again keeps these large files just in perpetuity outside of our system. And then finally, the CA part, it actually has hooks into Procore if that project happens to be using Procore. So then all the things pertinent to the architecture, like change orders and proposal requests and things we might generate, like ASIs and responses to things like that, get pulled out of Procore and like saved in our system, so that we have a record of it in perpetuity again. And actually, if you stop paying your bill, you still have access to your data. So it's a really great product that we've been pretty happy with.
I would imagine. How many users do you have at Lake Flato?
We have 150 people, and we're primarily architect only. We don't have MEP, structural, LA in-house, but we also have interior design and some small urban planning studio.
It's just interesting, you would think email, that's kind of the mundane things of how we do business or whatever, but 150 users, people that I'm sure, coming in and out of the organization to a certain extent. And then, this is very important for an architecture firm to be able to archive and back reference things that, might be living in an email, 150 users wide, and needs to be related to a job. I can say that in a company of, 5-10 people, that I want to be able to go back and say why I did a thing. So that I could see that being, quite a tool when it comes to risk mitigation and the ability to go back and kind of figure out why things happen.
What were some of because we're seeing a lot of plugins and different stuff for like Revit lately, and I say lately, we just have seen a lot of those, and then a lot of other tools that are like time savers and things like TestFit. What sort of tools are you seeing out there that are saving you guys a ton of time in iterations and design? Like what are some cool tools that you guys are using for that?
Well, just one Revit plugin off the top that I know we use a lot is Enscape for real-time visualization, which actually works in 3 platforms that we use: SketchUp, Rhino, and Revit. So that saves a ton of time, and we have 80% of our staff, actually our design staff, use Enscape. And we don't have anybody who's just a dedicated visualization specialist. That's how ubiquitous it's become in our office, which is amazing. But yeah, there's lots of other tools. We've been using this new product from Autodesk recently quite a bit called Forma. It used to be called Spacemaker, and has some interesting AI functionality in it to really quick do some like wind and solar analysis, but then you can do more complex analysis to get more accurate results. And it has the ability to track floor area of different use types like retail, residential, so mixed use, large projects. We have some really cool projects I'm hoping to be able to show off in the near future, but not at liberty to talk about yet.
You'd have to kill us, right? It's one of those.
Yeah.
On the generative AI side of things, like, so I mean, is Forma more of like a generative AI tool, or like, if it's not, what sorts of tools like that are you guys starting to leverage? Are you using things like what is the one, Dolly AI, things like that for visualizations and like conceptual stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of AI things, and one interesting thing, I'll just go through the little laundry list of items kind of at the top of mind. But whenever I talk about AI, I always like to mention that anybody, both at Lake Flato or outside of Lake Flato, that uses Enscape on NVIDIA RTX cards are actually using AI. By default, Enscape's using this NVIDIA deep learning super sampling, and all of the NVIDIA RTX cards. And so Enscape actually commissioned me to write an article for them about a year ago when they implemented this. And so it's a blog post on their website. All the RTX cards have 3 cores on them. They have the traditional kind of brute force CUDA cores, and then there's the RT cores and the tensor cores. There's like 3 different kind of purpose-built chipsets. The RT core, RT stands for real-time rendering, and sort of like a CPU has like math problems built into it, and you could just in code write out the math problem. But if you call this thing that's hardware, built into the hardware to answer the question for you, it's going to give you the result in a fraction of the time. So similarly, on the GPUs, there's these cores that have real-time rendering functions built into it. So Enscape supported that almost 2 years ago. And then just a little over a year ago, the tensor cores are AI and machine learning cores. And so what Enscape can do now is render approximately a quarter of the pixels. So whatever the resolution of your screen is, if you went into the Windows setting and cranked it down to a quarter, right? That's what Enscape is rendering. And AI is upscaling and also doing anti-aliasing and some other slight cleanup things, which is particularly noticeable as well when you're moving through space, which is what Enscape's really good at. So Enscape is a really great, like, super practical example of AI, allowing us to look at bigger models or in a regular model just more smoothly and in front of a client. The other thing is upcodes. So building code software that we use. They reached out to me a couple months before they went public with this AI add-in to their building code software. And being from Minnesota and now living in Texas, I'm familiar with the codes in the 2 locations. And Minnesota requires this vertical grab bar in accessible toilet rooms. So I asked upcodes with the current building code set to Minnesota, is a vertical grab bar required in an accessible toilet stall? And it came back with 2-paragraph description of why it is required, and then hot hyperlinks to all the sections that it was referencing. And then you ask with the current code set to Texas, and it was a really short answer. No, it's not. So that's pretty cool. And it's basically a upcodes version of a commentary on the codes. Then
I want to just get a little clarity on that. That upcodes is actually a tool whereby you can ask questions about the codes in a certain jurisdiction or wherever you're at, and it's going to return the answers faster than you going to have to flip through books and or use the internet.
So the AI part is that what you just described. Before that, and sort of their main product, it's the ability to search the codes, and then also if you set the code to your location, all the amendments and things are already there, and things that have been omitted by that state or jurisdiction are just not there. So you're only seeing what's applicable to that location, which is really cool. They also have like this wizard where you plug in your project specifics. Like you can save a project in upcodes and then sort of track your maximum buildable area and height and things like that. So it's and then you can add annotations for yourself as reference. And so it's just a really smart building code application. And then layered onto that is this thing where you can ask it questions and it'll respond to you, which is really cool.
Does this connect to a model in some capacity, or is this just like kind of its standalone currently?
Good question. So interestingly enough, I can't remember how long ago this was, 2018 maybe. I had written a blog post about this and I guess it was a test that they were working on and sort of dropped it, but they had upcodes themselves had an add-in to Revit that would automatically check the accessibility compliance of some specific spaces, like a toilet room, which I think is a great application for AI to really kind of focus in on really practical things like that instead of trying to design the whole building for you in one click of a button. But that probably have its place someday too. But
I'm sure, like even like I mean, toilet rooms for sure, but stairs I feel like is one that gets dinged all the time with code officials being able to read the model and say like, hey, no, don't do that because of this little piece right here that you're not considering.
Yeah, I think I've heard a little bit about this. Some jurisdictions are sort of looking into some opportunities to do code compliance on Revit models. And so the toilet room, there's some pretty basic things like the toilet stall from an adjacent wall and clearance in front of the toilet fixture. Excuse me. Clearance in front of the fixtures and to the side of fixtures and things like that. And of course, like probably everybody, we've been playing around with the text to image, which creates these amazing renderings. And some of that's based on like an Enscape rendering we've created. And let's have it take that and do some interesting things, just some variations on it for inspiration.
What would it look like with a tiger laying over there in the corner? That's typically what it's used for, right?
Yeah. Adobe Photoshop's beta with AI, you can actually add a tiger in the middle of the room.
That one is wild. So, I mean, being a photographer, I've been playing with that. And so I took one of the photos that I'd recently taken, I put it in Photoshop, and I was like, I'm going to put a lamp in that corner. I'm going to put a couch over here. I'm going to put a plant right here because, I mean, every corporate photo needs a plant. Let's be honest, guys. Like, fiddle fig all the way. Got to make it happen. And it just, boom, done. There it is. And it actually looks pretty dang convincing. Like, I don't know. It's getting creepy how good it is at generating little things in our photos. So Photoshop took it to the next level too, even further than like something like DALL-E, which is like generating a whole image. We're able to pick parts of an image within Photoshop and say, I need a thing here, and it will fill it in. It's nuts. And there have been some people that have been really, really stinking good at it too. Sorry, photo nerd here. Like, give me 2 seconds. There have been instances where people have put in like full rivers and like a bear fishing for salmon on the side of that river and like sky replacement, add in mountains, add in trees, add in a volcano, like, and made it look convincing. Like it is a real place just with AI.
I've seen too, though,
crazy
the picture of like that specific setting, but then you have like salmon jumping up the stream, but it's fillets of salmon.
Yeah,
like that. The prompt just kind of went wrong,
We're still there,
Yeah, you got to admit where you're at, and I want to admit where I'm at. I mean, like Dan, I'm asking you about something I don't know, right? My language is obviously a little clumsy as I'm like trying to figure out like, how are you using this thing? And it's because when we do these episodes, like an architect speaks, it's so that I find out about your world and I find out about like where are you living? What are you doing? What matters to you? I'm curious, like on the code side of things, how much of your time is exhausted and just trying to make sure that you're compliant?
Well, that's not really my area of expertise. I provide the tool for the teams to spend as much or little time, but it also, of course, relates to how experienced the person doing it is. I just was having lunch last week with this guy who's like the lead code person at a firm. He was in San Antonio for a conference, works back in St. Paul, and he said, I can do a code review in like 30 minutes. And sometimes I find out that some junior staff has spent, 2 days looking at this, and I could have done that in 30 minutes because I know all this stuff. So it depends on the experience level and where the project is. And there's so many variables.
I mean, that's an issue within organizations, though, because if he's not available to do that 30-minute code review, somebody has to. And who's to say that 2 days is not even as competent, that they just don't know? So we're trying to democratize the knowledge through use of these tools.
Yeah, and to be fair, needs to be a balance between those two extremes, right? Because the professional development or growth of staff is also really important. And the more, like Flato, we like to think of ourselves as generalists. We've done like, one of our partners recently said we've done one of everything and three of nothing, kind of jokingly. Like we designed the AT&T Center that the Spurs play in, but we've never designed any other arena before. And we just recently designed a 20-story canopy by Hilton Hotel on the Riverwalk in downtown San Antonio, and that's the tallest building that we've actually done. But and then right now we're doubling the size of the San Antonio airport, and we don't typically do airports, but in all those cases we've partnered with really amazing people. Like the airport, we're partnered with Corgan, who is a really strong national aviation department. So anyways, all that to say that there's lots of interesting opportunities when you're working with right people, but you have to be able to access them like you're suggesting.
Let's go into, so like we've kind of come into some of the different tech and all of that, but what are some of the big challenges that you face like pushing this tech out there? Is it kind of the training side of things? That seems like that would be one of the biggest issues, but what are the challenges you have with implementing these new finds into your team and training them up?
That's a really good question. And just to back up a little bit, part of the whole process of doing research is finding products that are consistent, easy to use, predictable, scalable. There's so many really cool things out there that it sort of sometimes takes an expert to do. So I like to use some examples of like Enscape and Autodesk Insight that we use for early energy modeling. There's a Revit add-in for doing professional electric lighting design, point-by-point illuminance calculations. All those things work directly against the Revit model, the single source of truth. You're not exporting it, doing stuff downstream. So having something that is easy to use and people can do themselves is like a really important thing. Once you've found those tools, and oftentimes some of those things aren't like the best thing. Like Enscape's not the best rendering engine out there by, I'm not going to pretend like it is. There's tools that you can spend 10 times more time creating and 10 more times rendering and get a better result. But once you find a product that is, it's still accurate and predictable and scalable, then that makes everything else a lot easier in terms of deployment. You're going to, basically do messaging to the firm, deploy it, do training, provide documentation, and then most important, BIM manager and design performance team provide just-in-time training or support when needed. It's not like, here it is, now you're on your own. hope it works out. And then having the experienced people to support it, or at least us being able to connect with people like Tonic DM, have an amazing response whenever we email them a question. So all those things we like work out really carefully ahead of time and we of course get some of our designers involved too, to make sure that it's a tool they need. I mean, we don't always know what, like on the technology side, what our team needs. It's not us telling them what to do. It's sort of a partnership, but with some guide rails that we put on it to make sure that it's successful.
I want to dig into one of the things that I saw whenever we were out there shooting the video for you, because I being a BIM guy, I thought this was really interesting, and it was something that I never thought would be really possible. But you guys are doing it every day. So your team is set up to where you kind of have like these hot desks and everything, where they could come in and they can sit down and they have their, they have a Latitude tablet, like a Dell Latitude tablet. They connect to workstations down in your bed. Like, I don't want to spoil it. Can you explain the workflow? Like how you guys actually like access Revit and Enscape and everything in your office? Because that was a really unique thing that I saw out there.
Yeah, and I suppose it might be worth framing a little bit more of what you just said, right? Your production leg of your company came out to our office to shoot this video for Dell, and we hung out for 2 days, right? While you did interviews and filmed some B-roll, and really excited to see that hit the streets in the near future. But yeah, our technology profile is really interesting, and it sort of started at the beginning of the pandemic. I actually started working at like Flato, I don't know, like 5 months into the pandemic, and had been at a previous firm that actually had quite a bit of laptops. And Lake Flato, interestingly enough, had like 5 laptops in the entire company. And it turns out laptops are the worst thing for the pandemic, because VPN is not the solution to work on a 1 gigabyte Photoshop or InDesign or Revit file. Revit can be in the cloud, and that's great, but that's not the entire company's work, profile. So we ended up buying every single employee a home computer package, and that now has set the groundwork or the foundation for our entire hybrid work model, which is really amazing. So at home, they have either an ultra wide or 2 displays and a docking station, and then that tablet that you mentioned is the thing that moves with them. It's basically like a laptop with a detachable keyboard. And so Dell actually in, I don't know, 2020, sometime in 2020, I think it was towards the end of the year, had a blog post about that work from home part of it. So then what we were using is VMware Horizons as the remote desktop protocol, and that has this really great graphics enablement layer that allows us to use Enscape and Revit and Rhino and SketchUp remotely. Like, it's actually utilizing the NVIDIA graphics card in that remote computer, and so it's then sending back essentially a high quality YouTube type video, right? And so once we decided during the pandemic to remodel our office, we actually took and the fact that we were going to this desk checkout system. Like, nobody in the company has their own desk except for marketing and finance and HR. And so all those desktop computers that used to be at individual cubicles went into our server room. I mean, literally desktops, because we own them, and they were actually fairly new, so weren't throwing those away. They're on a lease, so they're all on these bread racks and are right next to the servers, which is really amazing in terms of data security and data like robustness. When you remote into that computer, the computer is connected to the server just a few feet away. When you open a file, the server sends it to that desktop, right? Not the tablet. You're only seeing the desktop remotely. So data never leaves the walls of our office. And to access the data, it's just instant. You're never downloading anything over a VPN. And so, interestingly enough, as Tyler, I know you know, this is always a shocking thing to say, every one of our desks in our office are 100% Wi-Fi. There's no wired connection going to any desk, network cable. There's power only. And the reason we can do that is because all 100 desks are essentially just watching a YouTube video, right? That's the only thing coming across the wire. Nobody's downloading any files. I mean, the tablets do have Outlook on them, and somebody could download a PDF, right? But generally speaking, it's just remoting into the desktop, and they do that from home, from a construction site, from the client's location, from the airport, and then also from anywhere in our office. They're just remoting into that desktop using VMware Horizons as the protocol, which is, a pretty solid option, right?
No, so I mean, yeah, kind of like spinning this back. I saw people around your office, like they had a tablet, they sat down at the desk, plug into their monitor, and they had mouse, keyboard, and all that stuff, all the peripherals sitting there. And yeah, they would plug into Revit, they would plug into Enscape, they would plug into stuff that you would never run on a tablet, ever. Like, or if you did, you would be dying. Like, it would be very, very terrible. They're plugging into that, and that it's all just kind of happening there in real time. It is insanity to think that you could model and we talked to somebody out there that was talking about how they were literally overseas, and they were piped into one of the desktops, and they were able to model in Revit while overseas, and it wasn't laggy. That blew me away. That is insanity.
They get the best of both worlds. Of course, the portability of the tablet, but the tablets also are touchscreen with an active stylus. And as you know, architects like to draw. So there's sketching apps like Concepts. There's not all the sketching apps that work on iPads, unfortunately, work on a PC-based tablet. But there's this one called Concepts that we've actually pushed out to all the tablets, the free version. And then some of the staff who really like it and want to do more will buy a pro version. But we also have standardized on Zoom. So as you saw, our conference rooms are actually Zoom rooms, and there's a giant Dell touchscreen in there that people are drawing on. You walk by conference rooms and they're drawing on top of live Enscape views and Revit floor plans and PDF plans, but also the tablets were able to sketch on top of Bluebeam, sketch in Bluebeam or on a Zoom call. So that gets us to the desk checkout system, which you actually asked about. We use this software called Flowscape, which is really amazing. We kind of bought this package that include the conference room displays that are outside of our phone rooms and conference rooms. And then also all of those docking stations at all of these desks have this little Flowscape USB dongle plugged into them. And then the tablets have this little bit of Flowscape software on it. So when you show up at the office, you actually open this Flowscape app. I don't know how well this is going to work it's authenticated. And you pick your desk, and you do that every single day. So everybody in the office does this from Lake Flato and David Lake all the way down the chain.
It basically generates like this really cool 3D model that he can spin around too. So for people that can't see it, it's like a little 3D model, and you can kind of like spin around and just pick your desk. It's really cool.
This is right now. All the red desks have people sitting at them.
Yeah.
The red conference rooms are booked. You can sort of zoom in, and you can even see who's sitting where. And then you see one room is yellow. So all of the conference rooms and phone rooms have occupancy sensors in them. So somebody is in that space that either their meeting ended and they're still in there, or they didn't check it out. So if you were looking for a space, you wouldn't run up from the first floor to the third floor to that space, because somebody's obviously in there, even though it's not checked out. You can check it out in Outlook, but you can also just walk up to the room, and on the display, just instant book it from that little digital panel outside of the conference room. So it's really cool. And it also encourages people So two things: it encourages people to sort of mix up a little bit and not just sit with all your studio, all the higher ed people or all the eco conservation people. Used to just have permanent desks and they all sat together. Now people can move around if they don't want to sit by a window, or if they do. And then we have this hybrid work model where 50% of the time you're expected to be in the office. And that can vary from week to week, depending on what, client meetings and things like that. It's just sort of the goal. And which is great, because day one of opening our new office, we actually have less desks than people. And right now we're averaging, I think it's like 68% utilization rate of the number of desks we have, which actually, if you do the math, is about people being in 50% of the time, which also means, and I'm sorry, I'm just rambling because obviously this stuff's fun, but that also means we can grow another like 40% without having to add any new desks. In interesting construction little tidbit that I think you guys will like, attached to our 3-story building was this 1-story parking garage. And the original idea, I don't know if you heard this, Tyler, but was just to punch a hole in the wall and put desks in this garage. It could be made to look really nice. We could add a lot of desks, again, with the idea pre-COVID that everybody would have their own desk. But once the pandemic hit, we were out of the building. Here's a great opportunity to actually start the design and implement the construction. We decided and realized with this hybrid work model that we rather kind of stick to our ethos of connecting buildings with nature. It's one thing Lake Flato is really known for. So we actually deconstructed, not demolished, the roof of that garage, left the walls in place, made this really amazing outdoor courtyard that's now the entry to the building. You walk through this lush vegetated courtyard with a canopy and 3 big fans, which is really nice. And then all that wood that was deconstructed was actually reused in the building as ceiling accent slats, and all the work surfaces in the phone rooms are made from that wood. So it's got this little bit of circular economy story to it as well, which is really fun.
Yeah, that was kind of cool, walking in and seeing everybody using the courtyard, hanging out outside, and all the while they're actually doing like head down work in Revit, which is nuts. And just real time there, just hanging out, doing their thing. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty sweet setup.
I've got a question. In keeping with all of the intelligence that I've added to this episode, and I say that completely tongue in cheek, are people, I remember the lunchroom, and you didn't have assigned seats, but you kind of did. And people would get upset when you didn't sit next to the guy that you're used to sit next to. Is there any of that is going on as people are trying to pick desks? That's the prime real estate next to a really cool window that has a cool view of whatever. I want that one.
There are a few people that sort of land in the same spot, but the thing is, they don't really have much of a claim on it because of that fact that most people take advantage of working part-time from home. So there's days they're not there. Obviously, they don't have a claim on it those days. And then if they're moving around, it becomes this really fluid thing. And by the way, we all have these really nice lockers that were as part of the design. It's sort of like high school, where you put your stuff in your locker because you don't have a desk to keep your stuff at. Interestingly enough, when you show up in the morning, it looks like a brand new office, right? Because there's all these super pristine desks with nothing on them. So yeah, it's, I definitely see some people sort of always sitting in the same spot, but it tends to be pretty fluid. And then there's also this mechanism that was put into place. The entire 3rd floor, there's 5 studios I mentioned, and there's 5 days in a week. So the top floor is like 1 studio's for the day. They get it on Mondays, like higher ed or so, for example. So that encourages them to be together 1 day a week and also be in the office. That's like one of the days of their 50%. So there's some subtle things, little mechanisms that are in place, and it's all sort of fluid. We're still testing it. We've only been in the office since the beginning of the year now. That's when the construction finished. And before I forget, there's one other cool construction thing. You guys might know of it or talked about it on the show. During construction, we used open space. It's a 360 camera that mounts on a hard hat, and then you just walk the site as often as you want. And then it uses AI actually to figure out where you walked relative to just the PDF plan that you picked in the app, like where you're starting. And then it's sort of like Google Street View, but with time. So you can pick anywhere on the floor plan and then use a little slider across the bottom to scrub through time. And what's cool about that is that you see the existing conditions, you see exposed conditions like studs, and then you see conduit, and then you see gypsum board, and then you see paint, and then you see paintings on the wall. It's actually really cool. You can use that then to, if you're going to drill on a post-tension slab, you know exactly where to drill because you have a photo. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, everything's perfect, and nothing could go wrong ever. Well, yeah, man, it was a lot of fun coming out there and seeing it too. And I wanted to at least share that part of it because, I mean, it's changing our workflow here at even the podcast and how we're getting ready to redo everything in here. And it's the way we're working with our editors is completely changing as a result of our visit out to Lake Flato. Instead of them downloading all of the 4K footage to their device and editing everything out, they're actually going to be piping into the computer, editing on the computer, and getting all that done. So we don't have the data transfer going on, which is a really cool thing. So yeah, I mean, thanks. You've made the podcast just better for everybody here in the coming months as we deploy this. So, and if it goes wrong, it's all your fault. All of that to say. So, well, dude, all right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I think it's time to ask you our megaphone question. So if we give you a megaphone in around 60 seconds, what would you want to leave with? What would you want to say to the whole industry?
Well, I would say, since it's used specifically to the construction industry, obviously, thanks for everything you do, especially creating all the crazy stuff that we design, right? It's amazing. And of course, I look forward to continuing to work with the experts in the construction industry to move the needle on climate change and to develop amazing new means and methods and, applying materials in creative ways that are going to lower the embodied carbon footprint of a project, both the operational and embodied carbon footprint, and embrace, like I alluded to earlier, the circular economy and design for disassembly and let's use some cool technology while we're doing it, right?
Heck yeah, man. Well, all right, guys. Yeah, if you want to dig into this some more, we are releasing the video. I'll put a link in the description of the show. So if you want to see actually the video that we shot together, that's out, and you can check it out now and kind of see how cool the office is, because honestly, it's a pretty stinking cool office, Dan. So
yeah, there was an article in Metropolis magazine too on our new office. If you can check that out as well.
Awesome. We'll try to link that one as well. Well, Dan, thanks for joining us this week, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks for having me.